So we're going to try this whole video thing. And like I said, we'll see how it goes. I just really I feel like she succinctly gets to the point about climax scenes in a way, or the climax in a way that I would have labored over it. She does it really easily. So, because she's got that fresh brain. Can you guys see that YouTube screen? Okay, and then can you hear it?
Why does your story matter?
Good Lord.
Good question. What if I told you that there's
Can you
a
hear it
science
okay?
behind every great story?
Okay, so
I don't
it's about
just teach
13
you how
minutes.
to write. I teach you how to change the world with your story and make your...
One point, she has some writing prompts in the middle. She reiterates them at the end, so we're going to do them at the end. So when she has them, I'm going to skip over them for now, but we will come back to them, or at least one of them. Okay, here we go.
Your author dreams come true. You know why most writers fail to create a gripping, riveting, memorable climax that leaves you on the edge of your seat? Because most writers are too focused on making the climax exciting. Yep, you heard that right. Exciting. They're trying so hard to make the climax exciting, they end up doing just the opposite. They write a climax that nobody cares about. They believe that in order to engage the reader, you need to have a bunch of thrilling, flashy, scary stuff happening. They believe that adrenaline is the cause, not the effect of the reader's interest. And they inadvertently tell every contemporary writer ever, hey, your climax is not gonna be interesting or exciting unless you have car chases and spaceships blowing up. All of this is simply not true. Would you be surprised if I told you that so many writers have fundamentally misunderstood story? So many writers think that story begins and ends with what happens. They confuse plot for story, and their novels and screenplays suffer as a result. Not you. You know what's up. You know our motto here on this channel. Story is not about what happens, it's about how what happens affects and transforms the characters. Otherwise, everyone would be writing exciting genres like action adventure, sci-fi, or military thriller. Like if external conflict and action were the secret ingredients to a successful story, everyone would be writing that. But they're not. Why? Because external conflict just makes your mirror neurons fire, as if these events are happening to you. I'm sure you've seen lots of science fiction adventures that are filled with action and exploding spaceships, but they have no real story. And you've probably seen a lot of simple, everyday life, character-driven stories that were so compelling and emotional, you never forgot them. Well then, maybe the secret ingredient is something else. Maybe it's something that we overlooked because we didn't think it was exciting enough. Maybe it's internal conflict. If I made a supercut of all the time I've spent on this channel talking about internal conflict, it would probably be like 17 hours long. Why do I talk about internal conflict so much? Because it is what makes your story matter. It's what makes your climax matter. You can't raise the stakes until we know what the stakes are and why they matter to the characters. The stakes cannot be the same for every character. If they are, then you've got a plot-driven story on your hands and a protagonist that could be easily swapped out with any of your side characters. The stakes also can't simply be do or die because, again, you're falling back on those mirror neurons. Don't do that. You don't want your reader thinking, how would I feel if that was me? Rather, you want them thinking, how would I feel if I was them? Sounds like the same thing, but it's actually a huge difference. You're looking for that deeper empathy, not just a momentary biological reaction to an action sequence that we're gonna forget 10 minutes from now. Okay, Abby, but how do you raise the stakes if there's no life or death situation? Oh, there can be a life or death situation, but I'm inviting you to go beyond that. Find the internal conflict and let that take center stage.
How bad? Bad! I need immediate medevac!
You raise the stakes by clearly defining what this climax means to the protagonist. It will be different for every character, of course, and that's why it's so vital to define the limits of your character's comfort zone, preferably on page 1, because that's how we measure the importance of everything in the whole story.
I am her mother. You have never been, and you never will be my mother.
I'm not saying there can't be life or death situations. I'm just saying that even a story without a life or death situation can still be super climactic and engaging and exciting. But before we go into that, let's take a look at the description of the climax in the 3-act story structure. Climactic confrontation. Protagonist faces their biggest challenge yet. This is the moment everyone has been waiting for, where the protagonist is going to face their most difficult challenge yet. It's a true test of their character, and how they respond to the confrontation is the proof that they've transformed as a result of their journey. So your protagonist has already won the internal battle in their aha moment, but now it's time for them to win the external battle, which of course will force them to face off with their greatest fears. Prompt: ask yourself, how does my protagonist prove their transformation by crushing their misbelief and facing their greatest fear with courage? So what does this look like in your story?
I'm pausing it for a second because I want you to think about this idea of a character's, her word is a little weird, misbelief. Especially at the beginning of your story, sort of what is it your character believes about themselves that may turn out to be incorrect, or believes about their story that might turn out to be incorrect, and correcting it as part of the journey of transformation.
Well, it depends on what genre you're writing. If you're writing one of those more action-packed genres, your climax will probably look like a big showdown between the protagonist and the antagonist, or a battle between two armies.
I remember. This is the way Mufasa looked before he died.
Just remember who you are, you wretch.
But remember, this is not about what's happening on the surface. It's really about what matters to your protagonist. And that is how you can make a contemporary just as climactic as a fantasy. I write contemporary all the time, and this is one of my favorite things to do, is figure out how can I build tension within a very small, very simple premise, to the point where I have my reader on the edge of their seat. It's a challenge sometimes, but it's a good challenge because it'll make you a better writer, and it will make your story matter, not only to your characters, but to the reader, and beyond that, to the world. So if you're a contemporary writer, don't worry. Your climax can still be climactic. Your character can still face an intimidating challenge that forces them to prove their transformation.
You have bewitched me, body and soul, and I love you.
If you can make your reader care about your character, if you can get them emotionally attached to your character, they'll be interested in seeing anything that happens to that character, whether they're fighting an intergalactic battle with a formidable antagonist, or they're professing their love for their sworn enemy in a romantic field at sunrise. Because at the end of the day, we really don't care what happened. We care about who it happened to.
I know a real gun when I see one.
After the climactic confrontation, you know what happens next. Victory! Protagonist overcomes. This doesn't necessarily mean the protagonist wins the external battle or that things turn out exactly how they hoped. But the protagonist does experience a personal victory because they overcame their fear and destroyed their misbelief. Here's my rule of thumb. If your reader doesn't know how the character has transformed as a result of their journey, you need to rewrite your book until they do. Prompt: ask yourself, how has my protagonist changed as a result of their journey? No, your protagonist doesn't have to live happily ever after, but they should come to the realization that their misbelief has been wrong this whole time. The protagonist does have to change as a result of their journey. That's what makes a character arc powerful. That's what makes a story memorable.
No, Scar. I'm not like you.
Please! I want to live again!
I forgive you.
I personally love happy endings. Like if I read a book that's like kind of, it's like, okay, it's not that great, but it has a really happy ending, I will probably give that book an extra star just because it made me happy. But obviously, not all stories can have happy endings. Sometimes it's just too late to make things right. But that can be a thought-provoking theme in and of itself, one that might even change the lives of your readers. But regardless of the tone you take at the end of your story, you must show the reader how the character has changed. Otherwise, why did anything matter? Okay, final story beat that's kind of optional. Resolution, wrapping up loose ends. This is the part where all the loose ends are tied up. The reader should be left with no missing information or silent questions. If the book is part of a series, then you may want to end on a cliffhanger by swapping out the victory story beat with another plot twist. If the book is a standalone, make sure the reader's questions are answered when they reach the final page. Prompt. Ask yourself, where will my protagonist go from here? What does their life look like now that they have overcome their misbelief? I say this part is optional because it really depends on the style of your story. Sometimes I like abrupt endings that allow you to paint the rest of the picture yourself. Other times I like to allude to the future. You could do this with an epilogue if that's your thing, but I prefer to do just a little bit of hinting, usually in dialogue, to what will likely happen in the future for these characters. The thing about epilogues is they kind of limit your options. What if later you decide to write a sequel? Well, now you can't because you told the rest of their story in the epilogue. So I would recommend finding that balance between satisfying your reader and also leaving them hungry for more. Worst case, they're mad at you for leaving it too open-ended and you can just tell them to go write fan fiction. Okay, let's recap everything we just went over. Most writers fail to craft a dramatic climax because they're too focused on making the climax exciting. But external conflict, the plot, is nothing without internal conflict, the story. If a dramatic life or death situation was the secret ingredient to a good climax, everyone would be writing this. But it's not. Internal conflict is the secret ingredient. Raise the stakes by clearly defining what this climax means to your protagonist. Find the internal conflict and let that take center stage in your climax. Remember, this is the biggest challenge your protagonist must overcome, and how they face it will be the proof of their transformation. No antagonist to defeat? No problem. Contemporaries can be just as nerve-wracking as thrillers. If you make your reader care deeply about your protagonist, they'll be desperate to know what happens next. If your reader doesn't know how the protagonist has transformed as a result of their journey, you need to rewrite your book until they do. Your protagonist doesn't necessarily have to win the battle and live happily ever after, but they must change as a result of their journey. How they overcome their biggest challenge, the climax, is the proof that they have crushed their misbelief once and for all. Ask yourself, how does my protagonist prove their transformation by crushing their misbelief and facing their greatest fear with courage? How has my protagonist changed as a result of their journey? Where will my protagonist go from here?
Okay, so let's kind of revisit this real quickly. So what she's talking about here is that a lot of people tend to focus on like the action and the big events at the climax, what's happening, on the outside. And her point, which I really like, is that it's the internal conflict. This is like the culmination of all the events that have happened. And here's the point at which your character's transformation is sort of proved or shown in its most dramatic form. And her point too about if you don't really know what's at stake for your character, so what they stand to lose or gain, then by the climax, you won't have a climax, or you'll struggle with your climax because you will be trying to figure out, well, what are they trying to achieve? What's the goal? So I think that's a really important point. So I thought we could pick a couple of, maybe two of these prompts. Let's see here. I would like to do, what is your character's, I really don't like this word misbelief. What is your character's incorrect belief that they have at the beginning of the story? It can be an incorrect belief about themselves, something they were told, something about the story going forward. It could be basically a piece of information they don't really understand. Pickles, stop it. Sorry. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions about what that might look for? No, Natani? So pick one of your characters for one thing that might help. And let's say, for instance, I don't really know your character's stories deeply, but let's say one of the character's misbeliefs is that doctors always have their best interest at heart. And then she learns, no, they took my uterus. Of course they don't, something like that. Or, think about it in the context of it has to be something that they're going to come to learn by the end of the story is not true. Does that make more sense? And just kind of try for something, and you can write it as a list, as a sentence, as a scene, whatever comes up. Just take a couple minutes, see if you can identify what that is.
Is there a, I'm sorry. It's
Okay,
I'm
no,
trying
don't
to
worry.
take notes and my mind's wandering at the same time. So I'm sorry, what is the prompt though?
First, I just want you to identify what is my character's misbelief, incorrect
Misbelief,
belief
okay.
at the beginning of the story.
Gotcha.
right, wrap up your sentence, your thought. All right. Pickles, go away. No, you stop. Wing. Don't mind me talking to my cat here. He like circles my computer like a shark. Okay, who would like to share first? Martha?
Yeah, I'll share. Um, her wrong belief is that privacy is so crucial and that being exposed during performances somehow takes something away from her.
Mm. So like she can't be vulnerable kind of, or she's afraid to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I like that. Who else would like to go next? Anna.
Her wrong belief is that the world is always beautiful and that everyone has the same level of empathy and respect for human life as she does. She quickly learns that the world is vast and different, filled with ulterior motives, lies, and gritty deceit.
Nice. All right. I like it. I mean, I don't like it, but I like it from a fictional standpoint. Sajna, do you want to? You came in late, so I don't know if you caught the prompt. Did you? You're still on mute, so.
Yeah, I did catch the prompt. I wrote 4 lines. So I'll read them. So it's basically about the protagonist correcting a misbelief, right? Or
We were just identifying their misbeliefs right now. So you kind of jumped ahead, but share it, please.
okay, I kind of wrote 4 lines from her perspective, but it sums up the misbelief.
Perfect.
Okay. Bright lights of Christmas adorn the streets of New York, just like they did every year, except this time I could look at them with a new light in my heart. The joy that I'd found new friends, the discovery that darkness is not permanent, and the realization that the pain of loss must move on for a new dawn. That's it.
Nice. Thank you. I like that. Natani?
I did all of them. I just said they all believe they are safe in their own bodies and have both body and medical autonomy. Mary Elizabeth specifically believes she is superior and helpful. Chanel believes her strength and life experience will shield her from being harmed by men or Yoneg. And Tawodi and Sherry believe motherhood is their only path and purpose.
Beautiful. I'm impressed you pulled that off in like 5 minutes. Great work. Rita? Oh, you're muted, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Start my video. I just very simply, I'll always be a failure.
Awful. Yeah, and sometimes it is really that simple and direct. So good work. All right. So what I want us to do now is to write about how our characters have changed, and in that, so transformed by the end of the story, by the climax. Let me just back up and see if I want to rephrase this. How have they changed, and how can you demonstrate that at the climax if possible? But even if all you can get is how they've changed, and think about that in relationship to this incorrect belief. So have they changed in a way where they can see that belief is no longer true, where they've risen above it, where they've made some other meaning out of it, whatever it is. So you're going to kind of ask yourself, who are they at the climax? How have they changed? How have they corrected their misbelief? And can you show that in scene? If you can, you can. If you can't, don't sweat it. Hey, look, there's the mysterious Albert. All the cats are here today. Does that make sense? Okay. He's the old cat, but he looks like the new cat because he doesn't get center stage. Okay, you guys, your time is officially up, but I just have to leave a message for the attendance office real quick. So keep going if you want, just 2 minutes. Sorry about that. It has to be before 5 apparently. So, all right, finish up your last thought, sentence, word. And then we can share. All right. Who would like to share first? Martha.
Okay. So her internal victory is she's put on the spot at a high society party where her nemesis tries to embarrass her and send sexually aggressive messages. And she bests him by taking the Stradivarius and playing more spectacularly than he does and humiliating him.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And then of course that's overcomes her misbelief about being like playing in front of others and things like that. Go, please go away. I don't want you right here. I'm so nice to my animals. I love it. All right, who would like to go next? Okay. How about Rita?
Pretty short and sweet, that she figures out the best she can do is enough and that she takes a chance on starting her life.
Great. And is there a, I'm curious what your climactic event is in that moment. What is the chance that she takes?
Well, if I'm thinking of the story I submitted today, it would be she moves to live with somebody who she believes loves her and decides to start her life again.
Okay, so she's taking,
they're looking forward to a different life.
So she's making a change by moving and going. Okay. Natani.
I wrote a lot. Mary Elizabeth becomes who she really is and learns to combine what her adoptive parents taught her and who they expected her to be with the Cherokee woman she has become. The shift happens when it becomes clear the horrible practice she's been a part of is not healing, but medical rape and mutilation. This pivotal moment is displayed when her narrative switches from third to first person perspective. Cherry I only did her and Cherry. Cherry goes from believing she has one purpose, creating life, to a new one, raising children that have no home, family. She refuses to let the darkness and emptiness she feels take over. Dwayne doesn't let her succumb to falling into grief. He reminds her that her love is meant to be spread to many families and children, that she can still be the hope for the future, that it's even bigger than it could have been before she was sterilized.
Wow, I love those arcs. Those are fantastic arcs and a lot at stake. That's great. So and in some cases your antagonist might be it might not be a villain, which that young woman pointed out. It could be circumstances that have worked against them, forces, and it could even be something from their past that's held them back that they have to overcome, which is the antagonist. So
right.
Okay, who would like to go next? Yana?
My character realizes that she cannot just revel in the good that is in the world and be satisfied. She realizes that justice is the only thing that brings her true calm and the only thing that makes her feel like herself. She then realizes that the one thing that can make her human is the one thing that terrifies her to death, which is to face the dirtiness and the darkness that the world has to offer.
Wow. And what is, you may not know yet, what do you anticipate her climactic event being? Like what specific thing might happen?
Probably killing someone.
I love that. You're all, it's murder, okay? So just pickles. No, go. Okay, awesome. Sajna.
I didn't really write a lot, but I just tried to answer the question, how does she change, right? So I have a few ideas from, she changes from being indifferent to being more involved, from apathy to empathy, from not dreading loneliness to being more confident in herself, from walking away to accepting her destiny, from being human to being supernatural. So I need to flesh it out, but those are just my thoughts.
That's great. So this is all important, even if you're at the very, in fact, I'd say, especially if you're at the beginning of your story, but even if you've already written it, because you can go back in and make those tweaks. I like the idea of working backwards where you go, okay, this is who I want my character to be at the climax. Now, how do I get them there? Sometimes that can help you with plotting issues. So what are the challenges and trials and struggles that they are going to have to go through to change them from this misbelief, this incorrect belief, to this true, I would say, authentic state of being is a better way. Like the opposite of a misbelief to me is a authentic place, understanding who they really are, what they need to do, who, and the climax scene, I like to think of it as like the final catalyst that finishes up the transformation. Like they've already been in the process, but the climax scene is where it kind of crystallizes, and it usually asks them to rise to the challenge and sort of bring that inner resource they've been building but hadn't quite fully realized. It's the climax where that becomes, it's like they finally pull that tool out of their pocket and go, I know how to use it. So it's constructing that scene in a way that allows them to be their most authentic and strongest. And in the case where you do have an antagonist that's more concrete, in a way that can overcome that antagonist. So that just means they become more powerful than the antagonist, or they vanquish the antagonist, or they free themselves from whatever, it's usually a takedown of some kind. So yeah, anyways, any other questions that came up for you while she was talking that I can help kind of clarify? Did the idea about, I liked how she says it has to be more about who it's happening to than what's happening. So it's about making us care about that character, and that idea of stakes, which we've talked about before, what do they stand to gain or lose? We need to be able to see that the whole way through the story in order to care about their story. So what do they stand to gain? What do they stand to lose? And so, so even in your story, Natani, where some of your characters have already lost something, there might be further losses that they may face, or the fallout from those losses, right, that they're grappling with still. So it's like there still has to be an ongoing kind of series of challenges, and it can't be too straight line. So that's something to think about too. What do they stand to gain or lose? And I like to ask myself that question in every scene. Like, what do they stand to gain or lose in this scene, which relates to their goals, right? So what is their goal for the scene? Will they get it? Will they not get it? Will they lose something more? You can always take away more from your characters because it builds tension. You can always be meaner to them, harder on them. As tough as that is, because we love them, it makes for interesting fiction. Let's see, I took a few more notes. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the gist, but are there any other outstanding questions about the climax for anybody? Climax scenes. You can also have mini climax scenes throughout the story that are not the climax, but that have the same kind of one of the hallmarks of a climax scene is that it continues to build in intensity all the way along until the very last kind of minute, so to speak. So it's it has a more marked intensity than other scenes. Yeah, Martha.
And I feel like I always want to have the internal stuff go as deep inside as you can, but then also you want to have you want to get the fireworks going.
Yeah.
Like YA and stuff.
Yeah, and maybe it's like
at the table.
Yeah, it's like there's an explosive quality to climax scenes, and it could be a a bursting out in a positive way. It could be a letting repressed anger out finally. But that's true of the sort of mini climax scenes you might have where a character just can't take it anymore, has an explosion, or, lashes out, or, has to react to something in a big way. And you won't have a lot of them throughout the story, but you may have a few where the intensity level just really has to come up a notch because of what's happening to them. But the climax scene from the plot standpoint is it's like the payoff of the story. It's what we've all been waiting for or building to. And at first you kind of want to keep the reader doubting a little bit, like, is the protagonist going to overcome? So there can be a moment where that climax scene looks like, once again, they're going to suffer defeat. And then nope, they don't. And that's tricky to pull off, but it's, totally doable with practice, with revision. I'm working on one right now. I'm like, oh, this is hard, but it gets easier. You get the first draft down, and then you're like, okay, I can see it, hold it up, look at it from different angles. Yeah. Any other questions about that? Thoughts, discussion points? What'd you say? Your computer gave you a security message? Oh, so you get cut off? Oh no, I hope not. What does that mean?
Oh, it says you have to secure your machine.
Oh, I don't
And
get that message.
it'll tell you to like reboot it.
Oh no.
You can snooze it sometimes, but it didn't let me snooze this time.
Okay. Well, sorry about that. So let's take a quick break, just a pee break, and then we'll come back and we'll do Rita's piece. And just another heads up that at 5, I have to go online and check in for jury duty. So I'll still be, if you see me looking like my eyes are not on you, I am listening. I just have to find out if I'm called to duty or not. All right, let's take our quick break. 3 minutes. I'll be right back. I'm becoming the weird little bird lady. I'm trying all these things. Like I'm trying to get the birds to come use my bird bath. And so I bought a solar pump, and then I learned that they don't like running water. So, but I did get a visitor today after I turned it off. So pretty soon my life's going to be so interesting. You're going to be so jealous.
You put ice cubes in it when it's warm.
Oh,
But
that's
I
a good
read
idea.
do, yeah, because they want it cool.
That's a really good idea.
Ours was in winter, it's opposite, but this time of
Yeah,
year,
I'm going to do that. We have an ice maker on our fridge, so
some
easy to
cubes
do.
in there. And do you have a rock for them to stand on?
No, see, I don't have anything, but I will get one. Well, I have rocks in my property.
Yeah.
Tell me more. Tell me how to make the birdies my friends. Well, I feed them, so they
The
are.
other thing I heard is because I have one attached to a deck, and so I get only a certain kinds of birds because I'm in a space at certain times. There's hawks, so they don't want to be exposed. I have to be.
Oh, we don't get a lot of hawks in my yard. Just
if you put the food by the water, it might.
It is pretty close.
Okay. That's
but
all
I only just started putting it out. So, but I mean, these are some high maintenance birds, rocks, ice. I mean, geez.
Well, they like to perch. I guess they like to perch on something when they're.
Well, that makes sense. It's hard to fly and bathe at the same time.
Yeah, you can't just, you're gliding around in a little.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for those tips. I will send you video evidence when they show up. All right. Let us talk about the heat, what we loved in Rita's piece. Who would like to start?
He has to read first.
Yeah, see, I'm sorry, guys. I'm not present. Okay, Rita, will you please read some paragraphs for us from your
Oh dear.
Wherever you want.
I have to get it open. Hang on. Burp, burp.
Okay, what did I do?
So just okay. Deceased 1973 to 1975. Did you ever wonder why serial killers on death row are married and you can't get a date on a Saturday night? Thanksgiving 2001, me and my two older brothers and younger sister at my mom's new condo, tiny like a doll's house and close to my oldest brother and his wife in South St. Louis. The turkey tasted drier than usual, and we all seemed to drink more wine, bunched like bats around the old family dining table, now too big for the small space. All anyone could talk about are the terrorist attacks. Jane said there would be a war, that the president had just as good as said so amid the rubble at ground zero. What do you care, Kevin said. You're not getting drafted. No, but kids I know will enlist. Jane was a senior in college studying to be an RN. My mother, Jane, and I agreed that 9/11 was a big deal, but there were far-reaching implications. Kevin insisted we were, like many, simply overreacting. His wife never said a word. Is that enough?
Yeah, I mean, that's good.
Good.
Thank you. All right. Now that we have your voice back in our inner ears, who would like to start? My starter today, Martha.
Okay. Hi, Rita. As much as I am immersed in young adult fantasy, my first love is adult fiction, proper literature. So I can imagine this piece in its perfectly realized state, and it really reminds me of The Catcher in the Rye, and the attitude and the difficulty in succeeding at mastering adulthood in what society would think of as a successful way, and the way Holden Caulfield wonders what happens to the ducks in New York when the ponds freeze. And then the little morbid touches I really enjoyed. And that low-grade depression kind of reminded me of The Bell Jar by Cynthia Plath. She contemplates how her nerves would feel if she got the electric chair. And I love that, the voice, the opinionated, everyday, every man, every woman. It feels like sitting back and commiserating with your best friend, on a beautiful afternoon over a disappointing lukewarm cup of tea, and that can be very therapeutic, to kind of bitch and moan about how awfully unromantic life can be at times.
I love the questions of the pigeons. That's your linchpin. And I want more of that voice. There's something very tender and childlike about wondering about the animals. And I'd like to strengthen that part of her voice. So when the cynicism comes, there's more of a noticeable contrast of these different moods. I think that could be interesting. I got a lot from the relationship with Anthony, not so much Kevin. I really liked Mom. I want at least one redeeming quality for Mom, her efforts to get the family together. I really like the cocktail ring. I want a little more on that moment, what the ring symbolizes. I think you can add more optimism towards the end when she's cleaning to pack up and go. I think that's the moment where you could build it up a little more, but keep going, Rita, because you have a sound piece of literature that tells the truth about the world, and I enjoyed it.
Nice. Thanks, Martha. All right. Who would like to go next? Natani?
Yeah. The heat for me was when the narrator goes deep into their thoughts and how comfortable they are with their insecurities and things that they find flawed about themselves. It makes the reader empathize and want to see her get more from life and do better. I like the thoughts that and the made up life and death of the child. Like I really liked how the narrator had this whole like this is what the child looked like and this is what happened in their accident, and that was I like meandering moments like that. They really make you feel close to the narrator. What I'd like more of is dialogue. I love scenes and interaction between characters. So I kind of want to see the family dynamic in scene, like the dinner table and conversations about 9/11 and stuff like that. And I'd like to see more in scene conversations with her and the love interest, because I think there's a lot there. I like the dynamic that was already set up between the two of them, but I want a little more history since they'd known each other beforehand, and some conversations that can kind of just sprinkle what the mood is of their interaction. But I agree with Martha that it's a nice piece of adult literature. Like it's very refreshing to hear something that's so reality based and how people think and how people actually speak. And I think you understand people's minds really well. So I just like more of that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, Natani. All right. Who's next? Sajna?
Sure. So I really enjoyed this writing. I wasn't sure about the genre, but it seems like it's it could be an urban crime mystery. It could be a drama, or it could be like what Martha and Nathani said, could be adult literature. But whatever it is great writing. I just like the way you described ordinary everyday events and extraordinary events like 9/11 with flair and just the right amount of jaded, right? As someone who was from New York, I know that you can't really write anything more about 9/11 that is not being said. But I just like how the protagonist was just the right amount of fed up with the world kind of persona. There is an undercurrent of angst running through your whole narrative, which I kind of liked because it's she has a grim job, right? It's not really exactly a fun job, and her musings, her random observations about the world, I think they're infused with some amusement. They're very realistic. They seem to make all the ordinary things that are happening in her life seem extraordinary, even to the reader, which is what I really like, how you pull the audience into this not so happy, somewhat disjointed, somewhat dissatisfactory world, right? Where she's trying to date somebody. It's not exactly going well. and she has a grim job, and she has all these dynamics going on with her parents. I thought the characters are likable. Both the protagonist and Alex are instantly relatable. The descriptions are solid. What I really liked are all those hallmark type of jottings, right? The random musings, because they seem to have a theme. Whether the theme is, not finding love, washing your hair every day, trying to look good, the vagaries of friendship, weight loss, body issues, death, mortality, love. I just thought it was a very complex piece of writing, trying to delve into so many themes. And you still did a great job. So yeah, it was great.
Thanks, Ajna. All right, Yana.
Okay. Hi. I liked it. It was cool. I don't really read adult literature, which I felt like this was adult fiction. I don't usually read that. I'm usually a young adult person, but this was very interesting for me. I love the kind of 90s observational humor that it has. I really like that. That was a strict undertone. It really has an interesting like Seinfeld and Sex in the City type mesh, which was very interesting. It was less on dating and kind of in life. It kind of kept moving back and forth between that being the focus. And I thought the protagonist's job was interesting. You never think about who files the folders of dead people. Like you never wonder how that gets done. Nobody thinks about those kind of jobs, and it's very interesting how she spends so little time with all of these dead people in her hands. And I think that could really be a good focal point. I think we could really focus on that and get some really intense feelings and really intense context out of that. I think that would be really interesting to explore. And I'm not quite sure exactly what the plot was. I'm not quite sure if this was a romance, a drama, something, but I liked the things that were in it. I liked her. She was interesting. I never really got a name. I don't know if she had a name at some point. I couldn't really find that, but her siblings were very interesting to me, especially Anthony. Anthony seemed to be very kind to her. He always seemed to like her, be interested in whatever she had to say. So I think we could really expand on her and Anthony's relationship. I think that would really help with the emotional context. I would like more personal scenes. I see so many places where there could be flashbacks, where there could be just little snippets of their relationships with each other. I think that would really help us understand why they talk this way to each other and why they keep things from each other and that sort of thing. And all in all, I was really interested in this story because, as I said, I don't normally read this stuff, but I'm very interested. I'm hoping to see where this goes.
Nice. Thank you. Awesome. Okay, Rita. I always love your fiction. I feel like you have such an interesting voice that is always, you have this way of making what could be mundane interesting that I think is the hallmark of a good literary writer, actually, that you can be like, nothing's really happening and yet I'm compelled. And that's something, I don't mean like that nothing happens exactly, but your stories just always have that flavor to me. And I really love that. This narrator's voice has a real quirky quality that I really liked. It's kind of wry, a little bit funny, almost like unintentionally funny. Like the narrator just says these things and doesn't even hear. Like there was something about being Catholic that made me laugh. It was like, that was a big thing at one point or something. And I'm like, this made me laugh. Like it doesn't take itself too seriously, or people take themselves too seriously, but your narrator does not, which I appreciated. And I did feel at times that your narrator borders on almost being depressed. I got a depressed vibe from them. And I don't know if that's on purpose or if that's just in the early stages of the story, but like clearly the narrator's not in the happiest place in their life, at the beginning, which is good. We want a narrator in a place of uncertainty. And I loved this idea of working with people's death stories or death certificates. And I wanted more of that. I wanted like I just wanted more of those stories interspersed and to be used as a counterpoint kind of to her life. And I imagined that she spends all this time thinking about these dead people almost as a way of avoiding her own life, or like, so like I wanted more of that, a foray deeper into that kind of trip. Because when, like Natani said, when you got to that one story about the deceased girl, and I was so glad you came back to it because you kind of dropped it, and I was like, is she going to tell us more? I was just enthralled because I think that, first of all, one of the most powerful ways of bringing up or describing something sad is actually to describe the opposite, right? So instead of like, by telling us about this imagined girl's life, it helps us feel sad for who she might have been. I don't know how to explain that better. So there's just so many things I admired, and so many turns of phrase and quirks and things I highlighted. I would say for me, the two kind of sticking points or things that I'd love to see more of in the revision would be, one, absolutely needs more scene. It needs to be pulled out into a little bit of like, there's a little bit of a leaning towards telling, like summarizing events and things. And I wanted to see it in full color. And I also felt like I needed a little bit of a sense of an inciting incident for the story. Like, what is the moment that drives what is the moment this story begins and why, and what is it driving the narrator toward? And so I know because of what you told us earlier that, like she's driving towards this change, but like, why? I need a little understanding of why she wants to leave behind the life she has. And I wasn't sure if 9/11 was the inciting incident or if that had already happened a while before. So there's just a little question for me about like, what is the moment that the story really begins for the narrator, and kind of like what's at stake for her. But there's so much within it. I just can't wait to see what you do next and kind of where it goes. And I wondered if you have read the short stories of Lori Moore. A little bit. Well, if you get a chance, my favorite book of hers is called Self-Help. And I just think she's one of the most brilliant short story writers, or at least she was. I haven't always loved her more contemporary stuff, but her older books like Self-Help and Birds of America and one other. But your voice sometimes reminds me of her. She has a similar quirky wisdom that that I just don't see very often, and I think you have a similar style. All right, now the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. That's really helpful. It's kind of reworking this a little bit of an older story. And I was trying to play around with the form. So I was trying to propel the narrative by the questions she was asking, and to start it in a chaotic time. We all know what's going to happen, but it's a real changing time. Like, we know what happened in the last 20 years. It's, they don't, but we know.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what I wanted to start with. And I wanted the little girls, like that she made up this narrative for this mother and daughter because she did feel empathy and sadness. Like they got their lives cut off, and so she gave them this story and she gave them this ending. And I think what I wanted to do was have her like, I'm not going to let that happen to me. Okay, I've got a lifeline that just popped in. I'm going to take it. And I didn't want to do it without. I wanted to kind of do it with the questions being asked. So not super overtly, but I guess I still need to work on that a little bit.
Well, the questions are really interesting. I actually feel like you could have a couple more even, like if anything, I think you could go, more intense with that sort of line of thinking. Cause I definitely got the sense that you were playing with form, and I loved the questions. They're compelling to me. And the fact that they did get answered in their own way but not necessarily right after they were posed, was definitely interesting to me. I think it's a little bit like it comes back down to that whole trying to show the world in which the narrator is, the unsatisfied state in which the narrator is before they make the change, helps us to understand them better when she does take that lifeline. Like I think because there's so many interactions with different characters in her family that wasn't quite as clear to me, that she's like trying to get away from this life. I mean, yeah, it's unsatisfying. Many families are. So I just think we need a little more clarity that she's kind of chafing within it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
and I didn't know how long I could keep that propulsion going in that story. So to me, it's very like, I don't want to keep adding because I think you'd get sick of hearing that
You could get an, I feel like you could add
kind of with
two or
that, with
three.
its very self-conscious kind of format. So that's what I was like.
I know
I'm-
what you mean. I know what you mean. I think you
Yeah.
could add a couple more personally, and I wouldn't have gotten bored. Just like I could have handled another story about the dead people. Yeah, Martha.
Yeah, the voiciness is why we're here. You know, give us that. Her voice comes through so strong in the questions that just unleash her.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good way to put it. It is kind of like your story is all voice, and that's where the voice is strongest. The story is most compelling.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for everybody, because I know it's really different from what everybody else is writing. And I love reading everybody's young adult fantasy stories, because it's kind of waking me up and making me, I tend to get lost in sort of the voice and the little moments. But it's, and I know it was kind of a different thing to throw at everybody. So
No,
thanks.
don't apologize. That's
Really
the beauty of
really great feedback.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I would really like to see what you do with it as a revision, even if you don't submit it in class. I'd love to reread it. And I think you have really good
somewhere.
Yeah, and I think you have really good instincts as a writer. Personally, I think what interests you and what compels you is interesting. So go with it. Yeah. All right. I don't have to show up for jury duty next week, but I have to check back in. So they're not done with me yet. Has anyone here ever actually served on a jury?
Once.
You did?
I did, but it was a mistrial. So, and then I think we were on trial. The voir dire was so personal.
Oh gosh.
And there was a woman that I was working with. Like, I didn't work with her directly, but she worked at UC Berkeley, and she was kind of high up in the chain. And they were asking, do you have people who have alcohol problems? Do you know people who have been in drunk driving accidents? Anybody in your family? Because it was a drunk driving situation.
Yeah.
All this really horrible. And I'm like, that's not right. And then we get there and we start it, and it was a mistrial because they didn't feel like they had enough of a good enough translator for the defendant.
Oh my goodness.
So I guess I should write a story about that.
There you go.
But that was the only trial that I otherwise yeah. And I was so, because I really, you want to see it through. And after all of the voir dire, it was just, oh yeah.
Just make myself out to be a screaming liberal who's against everything.
You believe in the death penalty for everything.
Yeah, just be really firm about it.
Being a foster parent really helps, especially if because they assume that we're going to be there was this one case that Russell got called for, and she had sold her children for drugs. Yeah. And he really wanted to be on that jury because he wanted to put her in jail really bad. And it was really obvious he wanted to be on that jury.
He couldn't keep it back.
Yeah. He was like, I was a foster parent for 7 years, and they're like, dismissed.
Oh, he cares too much about children. He's dismissed. What?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's funny though, how they rule people out. It's so strange, but yeah. Well, we'll see if I have to do my due diligence. All right. Instead, tomorrow I get to go to a baby shower for my sister outside where there's all this family drama. So yay for me. My sister's mother is being a drama queen, and my brother is
observe the dialogue.
Yeah. I'm going to be all.
I was going to say, yeah.
I'm going to be busy.
Scenes.
Well, I'm going to be busy trying to keep people from punching each other while I observe the dialogue. Family is the gift that gives writers, that keeps on giving writers.
Seriously,
right?
every time I get in it with my father, I'm like, you keep telling me to write. I'm like, do you really want me to write what I know, son?
Did you see that
keep
post?
talking.
Did you see that post I made, Natani, in my group? That was it was Saeed Jones, and his point was yeah, go ahead, be mean to me. I'm a writer.
Yeah.
Yes.
I used to yell that at my ex-husband all the time. Keep talking, fucker.
All right, y'all, let's set our goals. We got a little earlier break or end time today than usual, because I let that 25-year-old speak for me. She did a good job. I'm kind of like, crap, man, with people like this on the internet, who's gonna need me anymore? Whoa. Yeah. All right, Natani, your goal for next week.
I submit my submission.
Submit your submission.
Mm-hmm.
And Rita.
I'm going to keep tweaking the story, and working on a longer novel.
Ooh.
That I have.
Love it. Is that one of the ones you started in the last class? No,
No.
it's okay. Don't feel bad. You're prolific. I love it.
Jumping around, like I said, I'm jumping around like a flea, but this one is something I started. Actually, I have a synopsis and I have probably about 60 pages. So I'm going to kind of dust that off and see how that's going.
Awesome. I love it. Yana.
I'm going to keep revising my book.
Great. Martha.
I'm going to continue my scene inventory.
Continue scene inventory. And Sajna.
I'm going to do some research. I had to step back again from my 2 chapters and do a little more digging around.
Digging around. Awesome. All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful weekend. Wish me no fist fights tomorrow, and
Yeah, good luck.
I'll report back next week.
Let the drama wash over you.
Oh, just let it wash
if
over
you
me.
give us anything, I want it in scene though.
Okay. I'll write it up for you. I'll write it up and submit
Take notes
it.
while they're doing it. That'll freak them out.
I know you're
I'll be like,
recording,
Just
taking
go
notes.
again.
Yeah, exactly.
Start
Can you do that?
writing. Mhm. See what they do with that. Oh my gosh. I actually have a bunch of stories that they're fiction that I wrote when I was in graduate school that are so thinly veiled of reality that I realize I can't really publish them because my family would stop speaking to me. So gonna have to wait till they're dead. Anyways, no, they'll never die. All right, you guys have a great weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
I'll send out recording later.